21ª Cátedra Europa, el encuentro académico y cultural del Caribe colombiano y el mundo académico europeo. Europa se vive en el Caribe.
I apologize in advance. I don't speak Spanish, so I'm going to do this in English, and I hope you can follow along. How many entrepreneurs are in the room? Can you raise your hand? Oh, cool. Okay, thanks. So this morning, I just wanted to talk about energy. I've been spending a lot of time the last 2.5 years looking at this industry, and I think there's a huge opportunity, and I wanted to share this with you. So I'm Jeff. I'm originally from Hawaii. I was born and raised in Hawaii. I've lived in Japan for 27 years, and I spent 10 years in Silicon Valley. So half my life in the US, half my life in Japan. And if you can do the math, you know my age. So I started my career initially as an investment banker. I was a research analyst at a large Japanese securities firm. I went on and became a lawyer. I worked in Silicon Valley and New York, LA, Tokyo, mostly working with startup companies. So that was my focus. And the last 20 plus years, I've been an entrepreneur, building and starting companies and then selling them, and just kind of repeating that. And I did venture capital for about 10 years, really boring, all due respect to everybody here. And then for the last 2.5 years, I've been an executive at a very large company. We have 40,000 employees, and it's about a $50 billion company. Even more boring. So I really, when I describe myself typically as a serial entrepreneur, because that's really what I think about in the morning when I get up and at night when I go to bed. And everything in between is really about starting and building companies. These are the companies that I've started as a co-founder. If I had another couple slides, I'd show you all the companies I've invested in. But again, I really think it's more like a sport, right? I'd rather play than watch it on TV. And so for me, starting companies is actually a lot more fun and more rewarding. And fortunately, I have a very short memory. So every time I finish a company, I forget how hard it was, and I go and do it again, and then I regret it. And then, yeah, you get the picture. Sorry, the one at the very bottom right, that's the company I just started this week called Trendy. It's been in the planning for over a year. And because this is a regulated industry and I had to go get licenses, it took a long time. This is not a lean startup. This is a very fat, slow, ugly startup. But hopefully we'll be lean now that we can execute. So why am I talking to you about energy? Historically, ever since I can remember, for sure, and I think everybody in this room as well, you know, fossil fuel has really driven the economy, all the economies. So thanks to oil, gas, coal, whatever, we've had a lot of economic prosperity. And it's always been linked to this kind of fossil fuel. This is starting to change. Unfortunately, this is also changing. Fossil fuel creates, well, I don't know if you believe Donald Trump, that's different, but I think most people would agree that fossil fuels are responsible for a lot of the global warming right now. And I think the science proves this as well. This is showing you how warm the world is becoming, and it's really scary. So governments are trying to deal with this, but it's a global problem, and governments have limitations. So I'm not a politician, I'm not a lobbyist, I'm not really an environmentalist, I'm just an entrepreneur. So that's what I do. I typically start companies when I find a problem that bothers me so much that I can't forget about it. I actually have a refrigerator, and I put Post-its on the refrigerator. Every time I come up with a dumb idea, I put it up on the refrigerator, and over time, I take it off, or I put it up higher, I put it down lower, or whatever. And over several months, there'll be one Post-it that kind of moves to the top and stays there. If it stays there long enough, I usually start a company to take care of it. This one really bothered me. So as Wang Ho mentioned, actually, I thought you were going to give my whole presentation for me. Next time. Yeah. So you all familiar with this? Fukushima, nuclear meltdown. Yeah, this is a photo of some of the, well, part of the nuclear power plant in Fukushima. We had a massive meltdown here because the tsunami knocked out the backup power generators, which TEPCO had stupidly put outside. So when the tsunami came, which they said was unpredictable or unforeseeable, even though they were told it would happen, it led to this disaster. So this is a chart that shows you how much power and the source of the power being produced by Tokyo Electric in 2010 and then in 2014. So just so you know, Tokyo Electric is about a third of Japan's power. They're one of the largest companies in Japan. As you can see, in 2010, 26% of the power produced was from nuclear. And that went to zero. And so the difference was pretty much made up by a very small increase in renewables. So if you look at the very top, there's 11% in the light blue, that's renewables. 9 of that is hydro. So only 2% was like solar and wind. Very tiny fraction. If you forward to 2014, it increased another 4% in terms of solar and wind. And nuclear went to zero. So all the difference was made up by burning more fossil fuel. So massive importation of coal, gas, oil, and we're burning all of this stuff to make electricity in Japan. In 2015, this is for all of Japan, and this is a government study. It shows that we had zero nuclear, and unfortunately, in 2015, the government decided, in its infinite wisdom, that we were going to go back and increase nuclear again. I think we wasted a perfectly good catastrophe. In any case, the government is predicting that by 2030, we're going to have a lot of nuclear, 22% nuclear. Total BS. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's what the government says. So this really pisses me off, and as a result, I decided I'm going to go start a new company. And actually, I had criticized Tokyo Electric at a dinner, which I thought was a private comment. I forgot that the person I was having dinner with, his company is a portfolio company of Tokyo Electric. They invested in his company. And the next week, he invited me to dinner, and I show up, and there's some executives from Tokyo Electric that are joining us for dinner. And he says to me, "Tell them what you said last week." So a little surprised, but of course, I told him what I thought. And surprisingly, they said, "Why don't you come work with us? And if you want to do this, we'll pay for it." So this is the newest company I've started. It's called Trendy. It actually stands for TEPCO Renewable Distributed Energy. Nobody, I would say, maybe 10 people within TEPCO actually know about this company. All the other people would probably be against it, but we're using their money to start this company. And it's actually going to compete with the main company as well as all the other energy companies in Japan. Anyway, the idea, sorry, this is not an infomercial. None of you live in Japan, so I'm not trying to sell you anything. Just trying to explain. The idea here is to accelerate the trend, which is to decrease the cost and increase the accessibility of renewables to the point where it kills fossil fuel and nuclear in the marketplace. So in other words, I'm not trying to lobby. I'm not a government official. I'm just saying I can probably make renewable energy cheaper than anything else in Japan, and therefore people will choose it because it's cheaper. And it just so happens that it's cleaner. So again, this is kind of, there's only one slide. I'll skip this quickly, but we're planning to do this by deploying solar on rooftops and batteries, using distributed technologies like blockchain and whatnot to connect everything, to provision energy on an on-demand basis, and really kind of go out and compete against the monopolies. So why now? What's changed? You know, fossil fuel has been the power in every sense of the word up until right now. So why am I pitching you this energy? Well, the main thing is technology. I think you're all entrepreneurs, right? Many of you here. Up until now, if you wanted to compete in this business, you had to have a large balance sheet. You had a lot of cash. That's not good for entrepreneurs. That's usually what we don't have a lot of. But technology is changing this. It's changing it in many ways. First of all, in solar panels, the efficiency keeps increasing. The red line on top looks really good, but it's actually one of the lesser technologies. The green line and the blue line are the ones that are more common. But you'll notice that they're increasing. And even if it sounds like a small increase, if you look at the blue line, maybe they're at about 15%, 14%, something like that right now in 2017. 2018. So we're about, I think, 17, 18% now. If you compare that to 1995, where it was less than 5, right? That increase, if you think about going from 5% efficiency to, say, 17%, that's more than 3 times. So it's not perfect. It's not 100% conversion. But if you think of the increase, it just tripled. So from a cost basis, it means the cost to produce 1 kilowatt hour went down by 1/3 just because of the improvement in efficiency. Batteries. Okay, I will guarantee that all of you here have a cell phone, right? In the last 20 years, we've been making a lot of cell phones, and they've really spread all over the place. One of my previous companies, that's what we built. We built cell phones. This technology, lithium batteries, started off really tiny because it was expensive, but it had high power density. We have been able to scale this up, and now a Tesla Powerwall or even a Tesla vehicle contains lots of these cells, actually very small cells, but a lot of them. And so the cost of manufacturing these cells has gone way down. The expertise in building it has gone way up. The efficiency has gone way up. This is a Tesla. This is the powertrain, and you notice the flat bed here, that's all batteries. Because they're using small batteries, they're able to fit them in the bottom of the car, and it actually is built into the bottom of the car, which provides some additional benefits. But it's just to go to say that technology keeps advancing. And right now, we still say EV, right, for electrical vehicle. I think in 10 years, we will stop saying EV the same way we do not say color TV anymore, right? It's just TV, because that's what becomes expected. And I bet you within 10 years, we're not going to say EV. In fact, within 5 years, I predict that most new cars that are bought around the world will be EVs. It's going to happen sooner than most people think. Autonomous driving, you've heard of this already, right? Google's working on it, Uber's working on it, everybody's working on it. When you combine this technology with the others, interesting things will happen. Blockchain. I'm spending a lot of time working on blockchain technologies right now. I'm not real big on crypto. I have a little bit, and I play with it, but really I'm interested in what you can do with blockchain technology, distributed ledger technology in the real world, and I'm trying to marry that with distributed energy. And then mobile payments. This is actually huge. I was in Kenya the other week, and they're able to pay for their energy. Basically, they buy a solar panel, and they don't have a lot of cash saved up, but it's cheaper for them to actually pay on a daily basis for the solar panel than it is to go out and pay for kerosene. So to power their LED lights, they're using solar panels, batteries, and they're paying for it on a daily basis with their cell phone. This is huge because it allows the operator to collect payment on a daily basis, which normally, if you had to go out and get payment in cash, it would be too expensive. It would be too difficult. You'd have to have a huge army of people doing it. But if you can do it with a mobile payment, it really lowers that hurdle. So these are all technologies which are all advancing on their own, but when you combine them, it's going to create a huge disruption in the energy markets. The main disruption is cost. So as I mentioned earlier, you have all these increases in efficiency and capability, and you have these increases in manufacturing technologies and experience, which lowers costs significantly. This is the cost of PV. So back in the 1970s, it was outrageously expensive. Only the government could do this. It was like a toy. It was so bad and so expensive that people thought this will never become mainstream. But as you can see, every year it's gotten cheaper and cheaper. And you're familiar with Moore's Law, right, on semiconductors? There's something similar called Swanson's Law, which basically talks about how manufacturing efficiencies, as you increase production, it lowers the cost, usually 20% every time you double production. In any case, if you look at power production, most sources of conventional power production increase on an annual basis. They get more and more expensive. For distributed solar, it's actually getting cheaper. It's kind of like buying a computer. You expect the computer to increase in performance and decrease in cost every year. That's what's happening in solar. I don't know how you stole my slides so quickly. That's amazing. It's hard to see on this chart here. There's a gray area under 20 cents. It's at about 17 cents. And that is the space where conventional fossil fuels have been competitive in the past. So all the other stuff was above 17 cents until very recently. And if you look at the yellow one, which is solar, the one in the middle, it's really come down dramatically in the last few years. And right now, it is cheaper to put solar panels on your roof and generate electricity on your own than it is to buy it from the electric company in many places. Not all places, but in many places. In Spain, for sure, because they have so much solar. Even, I think, here in Colombia, you've got 65% of your power coming from hydro, but you have 35% where you're burning fossil fuel. And that's actually, it could be even higher because there are many industries like auto, cars, which you've not electrified yet. So if you electrified all these other spaces, your demand for fossil fuel would be much higher, and I think you could actually replace it with solar. And I strongly recommend moving in that direction. In any case, this chart is just to show you that renewables now are extremely competitive with all other traditional power production means. This is a chart showing you the Nissan Leaf, an EV. You'll see that over time, the performance has improved. So initially in 2010, the batteries only allowed you to go 200 kilometers. Today, you can go more than 400, right? And the cost has come down. So it's very similar to a computer, right? Performance goes up every year, cost comes down. This phenomena is happening in energy. And this is creating an opportunity for entrepreneurs like us where we can go in and really disrupt the market. We can compete against these large companies even though we don't have a lot of assets. Sorry, just more graphs. I'm kind of a geek on this. It's just showing you that a conventional car, it's an ICE, it's an internal combustion engine, so a normal car competing against an EV. And if you drive it, and here's the point. Remember we talked about autonomous driving and EVs? When you combine that together, what it means is that each EV will be on the road longer. It will drive more, right? Right now, if you have a car, on average, the car is sitting parked for 96% of the time, right? So most of the time, you're not driving it. And so if you calculate on a per kilometer cost, it's actually very high because you only drive it a little bit. But if you drive it a lot because of autonomous driving and whatnot, and EVs, the cost will come way down. So if you have a taxi that's an EV without a driver, it's probably going to be racking up 60,000 kilometers at least, in which case the cost per kilometer goes way down to 29 cents instead of 65 cents. This phenomenon, this combination of autonomous driving, EVs, solar power will all contribute to this rapid decline in cost. And when cost declines rapidly, adoption will increase. Again, this is a really cool business model. This was in Kenya. They basically sell these really tiny panels. They're only 80-watt panels. They're like a toy, right? Your normal panel in, say, Spain, I'm not sure about Colombia, but Japan, for example, our normal panel size is much bigger, and it typically produces anywhere from 175 to 300 kilowatts. I'm sorry, 300 watts. These are tiny. These are 80 watts. But the appliances are so efficient. This TV here is a 24-inch TV. It only takes 12 watts of power. So put that in perspective. The monitor I have for my computer at home is at least 200 watts. Right? And most of the computer monitors that you guys are all using are probably around 200 or more watts. This TV is 12 watts, super efficient. So I think there's going to be a boom in DC appliances coming up. And again, these guys get paid on a daily basis. So when a customer wants to pay, they just go to their phone and they use M-Pesa to pay. It's mobile money. So what happens? When you take all of these different factors and you combine them, it has a huge impact. Right now, the demand for power is increasing. In countries like the US, Japan, many countries in Europe, the demand for power is flat or declining. It's because populations are aging. But in many other places, I think Latin America, Africa, India, Southeast Asia, you have big jumps in expected demand for power. And the best way to meet this demand for power, this increasing demand, is going to be with renewables. So as I mentioned earlier, renewables, it's unstoppable. This trend is going to accelerate. It's not going to stop. Not yet, at least. It's going to go on for several more years. And this gives rise to what's called a prosumer. So in the old days, we had consumers, right? The power company makes all the power, sends it out, we get paid. Going forward, though, we're actually starting to compete with our customers because they put a solar panel up on their rooftop. And the trick is, in the energy business, marginal cost is the most important thing. It's not the cost of the total production, it's the cost marginally. So if you need to produce one more kilowatt hour of power, if you're doing it with renewables, the marginal cost is almost zero, right? Because the sun is free. And once that happens, and they can meet their own personal needs, they're going to export power. In the middle of the day, most of you are probably at work or at school. You're not at home, right? And in the middle of the day, your house is probably going to produce more power than you need. And you can either store that in a battery, or if you work with us, for example, we would basically be able to sell your power next door to your neighbor. Then you don't need all these big transmission lines, or you only need a few of them. And then the sharing economy, right? As you all know, the biggest taxi company now doesn't own any taxis. The biggest hotel doesn't own any hotel rooms, right? And so on and so on. So I think the biggest energy company in the future is not going to own power production. They're going to source it from you. They're going to basically take your power and crowd share it. They're going to sell it to your neighbor. So what can we do when power is cheap and abundant? Well, we could do a lot. This is what's going to happen. These are just cars that are already on the drawing board. So EVs are going to take over the auto market, and internal combustion engine cars are going to die. So EVs are just going to take over the market. Construction. Now, this may sound crazy to you, but actually, there's a huge opportunity here to electrify the construction industry. Right now, we use human labor. There was a big increase in productivity when they started using power tools. But there's going to be an even bigger increase in productivity when they start using robots to make walls, or 3D printing to make walls, or to actually make structures. In Japan, for example, right now, we have a new technology to build buildings. We actually build one floor, then we jack up the floor on hydraulics, and we make the next floor. And then we jack that up. And that allows us to build even in bad weather, because you're inside the building from the very beginning. Food production. This is using LED lights and a very innovative thin film. I forgot what you call it in English. There's a thin film sheet that you can use to wet it, and instead of having lots of water, you just have a wet sheet here, and it helps you to grow the lettuce or whatever other leafy greens you want to grow. This is all done inside with LED lights 24/7. So production is predictable. Weather will not influence your crop. You're not using pesticides because you don't have bugs. So this is a much healthier way to grow food, and if you're using solar power, it's sustainable. This is a way to make water from sun. Basically, it's just using 2 solar panels, and it's absorbing water out of the atmosphere. It makes about up to 5 liters of water a day. So in areas where you need clean water for drinking, this is one way to make it. This is not competitive yet. I think it's still an expensive way to make water, but the technologies are improving, and it's just mind-boggling to think of all the different things you could do. So the only question that remains to me is, what are you guys going to do? And I think there's a lot that can be done, and I strongly encourage any entrepreneurs out there who are interested in this area to consider building a business in this area, because I think it's going to be very profitable, and there's a lot of demand. It is a big problem, and it's a problem worth chasing. So that's it. Thanks for listening.
21ª Cátedra Europa, el encuentro académico y cultural del Caribe colombiano y el mundo académico europeo. Europa se vive en el Caribe.